miss that pretty smile, girl. Thanks for everything. Thanks, girl.
On November 26, 2025, at approximately 1:30 a.m., a shooting was reported in the 1400 block of South Franklin Street, Rocky Mount, Nash County, North Carolina. Responding officers located Britnee McKnight at the scene with gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead shortly after. A second individual, Tyquan Garrett, was also shot and transported from the location for medical treatment. The area was secured, traffic was restricted, and investigators began documenting physical evidence, nearby residences, and potential surveillance coverage. As the investigation progressed beyond South Franklin Street, attention shifted to movements traced across Rocky Mount and surrounding areas. Within days, two names became central to the case: Vincent Brunson and Qua'Damion Harris Johnson. One arrest occurred at a residence. The other followed a vehicle pursuit that expanded the scope of the investigation. What occurred in the moments leading up to gunfire and how each individual became involved remains under review as the case advances through the court system.
Two men face murder charges after a woman died and another man was injured in a Rocky Mount shooting. 29-year-old Qua'Damion Harris Johnson and 26-year-old Vincent Brunson are both charged with first-degree murder. The shooting happened around 1:30 in the morning on November 26th on the 1400 block of South Franklin Street. Police say they found Britnee McKnight dead at the scene and Tyquan Garrett suffering from gunshot wounds. Garrett was taken to the ECU Health Medical Center for treatment. Officers say they took Brunson into custody from a home today, while Harris Johnson was apprehended by Nash County deputies after a car chase. Deputies then searched a home and seized a gun, cocaine, and meth from Johnson's possession. Both men are being held in the Nash County jail without bond.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Britnee McKnight was an adult woman residing in Nash County, North Carolina, at the time of her death. Her full name, Britnee McKnight, became publicly known following a fatal shooting that occurred in Rocky Mount in late November 2025. Prior to this incident, she was not a public figure and had no known media presence connected to crime, controversy, or law enforcement activity. Available public information indicates that Britnee lived a relatively private life. She was not widely known outside of her immediate social and family circles. There is no record of her seeking public attention, operating a public-facing business, or maintaining a significant public profile through media or online platforms. In the period leading up to November 26, 2025, Britnee McKnight's daily life appeared routine. There were no publicly documented disputes, threats, or legal proceedings involving her. Her movements on the night of the shooting have only been partially reconstructed through investigative findings and witness accounts, and much of her activity prior to the incident remains known only to those who were directly present. Britnee McKnight maintained personal relationships consistent with someone living within a local community. Family members and acquaintances later identified her as someone known within her circle, though not in a way that placed her in the public eye. Statements made after her death focus on her role as a private individual rather than someone involved in ongoing conflict or criminal behavior. There is no publicly available evidence indicating that Britnee had affiliations with organized crime, gangs, or ongoing disputes that would have made her a known target. Law enforcement has not released information suggesting that she was under investigation or involved in illegal activity at the time of her death. Before November 26, 2025, Britnee McKnight's name did not appear in crime reports, court records of note, or public safety bulletins. Her public visibility began only after the shooting, when her identity was released as part of a homicide investigation. This sudden shift, from private citizen to named homicide victim, formed a central aspect of the case's impact. Britnee McKnight lived in Nash County, an area that includes both residential neighborhoods and sections affected by economic disparity. Like many counties with mixed urban and suburban environments, Nash County has experienced periodic challenges related to public safety, including violent crime in certain areas. Her living environment did not distinguish her as someone living in isolation or under heightened threat. There were no documented protective orders, emergency calls tied directly to her residence, or warnings issued by law enforcement prior to the shooting. There is no verified public information indicating that Britnee McKnight was facing significant legal, financial, or personal crises at the time of her death. Investigators have not identified her as a central figure in disputes that preceded the shooting. Any challenges she may have faced remain private and undocumented in public records. Law enforcement has not indicated that Britnee McKnight had a criminal history. No prior arrest charges or court cases connected her to illegal activity. This absence of prior involvement has been consistently noted in how the case has been framed publicly, emphasizing that she was not previously known to police. Within her immediate circle, Britnee was known as a private individual rather than someone engaged in high-risk activity. The lack of prior incidents involving her contributed to early questions surrounding why she was present at the location where the shooting occurred and what circumstances led to her being there. Rocky Mount is a city located in eastern North Carolina, spanning portions of Nash and Edgecombe counties. The city includes residential neighborhoods, commercial corridors, and industrial areas. Over the years, Rocky Mount has faced fluctuating crime rates, with certain neighborhoods experiencing higher levels of violent incidents. In the months leading up to November 2025, Rocky Mount had recorded multiple shootings, contributing to ongoing public safety concerns. Law enforcement agencies in the area had increased patrols and community outreach efforts in response to repeated incidents involving gun violence. Police activity in Rocky Mount frequently focused on late-night incidents, particularly in neighborhoods with prior histories of calls related to disturbances, drug activity, or violent crime. These patterns formed the backdrop against which the November 26th shooting occurred. South Franklin Street is a residential street within Rocky Mount, characterized by single-family homes and small multi-unit residences. The area experiences varying levels of activity depending on the time of day. During daytime hours, it functions as a typical residential street. During late-night hours, activity tends to be limited, making any disturbance more noticeable. Law enforcement records indicate that South Franklin Street and nearby areas had previously generated calls for service, though not exclusively for violent crime. The street was not considered a restricted or inaccessible area, and individuals could move through it without attracting attention under normal circumstances. In the hours leading up to the shooting, Britnee McKnight's exact movements were only partially known to investigators. She was in the vicinity of South Franklin Street late at night. Investigators later worked to establish who she was with, how long she had been at the location, and what events preceded the gunfire. Witnesses reported seeing multiple individuals in the area during that time frame. The nature of interactions between those individuals has not been fully disclosed, and law enforcement has not publicly confirmed whether any disputes occurred immediately before the shooting. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on November 26, 2025, police received reports of gunfire on South Franklin Street. Officers were dispatched to the location shortly after calls came in. Upon arrival, officers found Britnee McKnight suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. She was located at or near the street where the shooting had been reported. Emergency responders determined that she had died at the scene. Officers also discovered a second gunshot victim, later identified as Tyquan Garrett. He was found alive but injured. Emergency medical personnel provided immediate treatment before transporting him to a medical facility for further care. First responders secured the area to prevent further risk and preserve the scene. Medical personnel prioritized the injured survivor, while law enforcement focused on scene control and initial evidence collection. Police established a perimeter around the shooting location and restricted access to the area. Investigators began documenting the scene, including the placement of victims, shell casings, and other physical evidence. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, attempting to identify witnesses who may have seen or heard relevant activity. Initial interviews were conducted on scene, while follow-up interviews were scheduled as part of the ongoing investigation. Tyquan Garrett was identified as the second individual shot during the incident. He sustained gunshot injuries that were serious but not fatal. Garrett was transported from the scene to a hospital, where he received treatment for his injuries. His condition stabilized following medical intervention. Garrett survived the shooting and remained alive after treatment. His recovery allowed investigators to consider his potential role as a witness or source of information. As a surviving victim, Tyquan Garrett became a significant part of the investigation. His account, medical findings, and movements before and after the shooting were reviewed by law enforcement as they worked to reconstruct the events that led to Britnee McKnight's death. When law enforcement officers arrived at the reported shooting location on South Franklin Street in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, the first priority was securing the scene and ensuring there were no ongoing threats. Patrol units established a perimeter, restricting access to preserve potential evidence. Emergency medical personnel confirmed that Britnee McKnight had died at the scene, while a second victim, Tyquan Garrett, had already been transported for treatment. Investigators conducted a systematic search of the immediate area and surrounding vicinity. Multiple items of physical evidence were recovered, including spent shell casings, bullet fragments, and personal items belonging to the victims. The location of these items was carefully documented using photographs, measurements, and scene diagrams. Each piece of evidence was marked collected and logged according to departmental protocol to maintain chain of custody. Several shell casings were recovered from the roadway and nearby areas, indicating that more than one round had been fired. The casings were consistent in caliber, suggesting the use of a single firearm. Their distribution pattern indicated that the shooter or shooters were mobile during the incident rather than stationary. These casings were later submitted for ballistic testing to determine whether they matched any known firearms connected to the suspects. Investigators analyzed bullet trajectories by examining impact points on nearby surfaces and the victim's wounds. This analysis helped determine the approximate position of the shooter at the time the shots were fired. The trajectory suggested that the shots were fired from close to moderate range, supporting witness statements that the shooting occurred during a direct confrontation rather than from a distance. Bloodstain patterns were documented to establish where Britnee McKnight was located when she was shot and whether she moved after being struck. The concentration and direction of bloodstains indicated that she collapsed near the point of impact. This information helped investigators reconstruct the sequence of events during the shooting. Detectives conducted a canvass of the area to identify surveillance cameras on nearby homes, businesses, and traffic infrastructure. Several cameras were identified, and footage from the relevant time frame was collected. This footage was reviewed for vehicle movement, pedestrian activity, and any visual confirmation of suspects before or after the shooting. The identification of suspects began with a combination of physical evidence, witness accounts, and digital data. Detectives interviewed individuals who were in the area at the time of the shooting, including nearby residents and those who may have been present shortly before the incident. Witness statements provided descriptions of individuals and vehicles seen leaving the area immediately after gunfire was heard. These descriptions were compared against surveillance footage, which showed a vehicle departing the scene shortly after the estimated time of the shooting. Investigators also analyzed phone records and other digital evidence to identify connections between individuals present at or near the scene. Through this process, law enforcement narrowed its focus to two individuals, Vincent Brunson and Qua'Damion Johnson. Vincent Brunson was identified as one of the primary suspects based on witness information and corroborating evidence. Brunson was in his mid-20s at the time of the incident and was known to have connections to the area where the shooting occurred. Investigators determined that Brunson had previously been present in the neighborhood and was familiar with South Franklin Street. This familiarity supported the theory that the suspects were not passers-by, but individuals who knew the area and its layout. Public records indicated that Brunson had previous interactions with law enforcement, though these were unrelated to the homicide. Investigators reviewed this history to establish patterns of behavior and potential motives, but did not rely solely on prior contact to build the case. Brunson was taken into custody during a coordinated operation conducted by local law enforcement. The arrest occurred without resistance. He was transported to the police department for questioning and later booked into custody. Qua'Damion Johnson was identified as the second suspect through the same investigative process, including surveillance footage and witness accounts. Johnson was in his late 20s and had a known presence in the area. Investigators linked him to the vehicle observed leaving the scene shortly after the shooting. When officers attempted to stop Johnson, he fled in a vehicle, leading to a pursuit. During the chase, officers observed items being discarded from the vehicle. The pursuit ended when Harris Johnson was apprehended without injury to officers or civilians. Following the pursuit, law enforcement recovered controlled substances that had been thrown from the vehicle. This evidence was collected and later confirmed to be cocaine. The recovery of these substances resulted in additional criminal charges. In addition to homicide-related charges, Harris Johnson was charged with drug trafficking and fleeing to elude arrest, expanding the scope of the case beyond the shooting itself. The arrests of both suspects involved coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies. Investigators planned the operations to minimize risk to officers and the public. Local police worked alongside county deputies and specialized units to execute the arrests. Communication between agencies ensured that each suspect was located and detained efficiently. Officers used controlled entry and containment strategies to prevent escape or escalation. Surveillance was conducted prior to the arrest to confirm suspect locations. Brunson was arrested first, followed shortly by Harris Johnson. The sequence of arrests allowed investigators to prevent communication between suspects that could interfere with the investigation. Both suspects were processed, fingerprinted, and photographed before being transferred to detention facilities. Both Vincent Brunson and Qua'Damion Harris Johnson were formally charged with first-degree murder in connection with the death of Britnee McKnight. The charges alleged that the killing was intentional and carried out with premeditation. Prosecutors indicated that evidence supported the theory that both suspects participated in the shooting. Charges related to the shooting of Tyquan Garrett were also considered, reflecting the seriousness of his injuries. Harris Johnson faced additional charges related to the possession and trafficking of controlled substances recovered during his arrest. First-degree murder carries the most severe penalties under state law, including life imprisonment. Following their arrests, both suspects were held in the Nash County Jail. They were housed separately under standard detention protocols. Judges denied bond due to the severity of the charges and concerns regarding flight risk. During initial appearances, the charges were formally read and legal counsel was appointed. At the time of reporting, the case remained active as prosecutors continued to prepare for trial and evaluate additional evidence. The prosecution's case centers on establishing intent, participation, and direct connection between the suspects and the fatal shooting that resulted in Britnee McKnight's death. From the outset, prosecutors focused on demonstrating that the actions taken on the night of November 26, 2025, were deliberate and coordinated rather than accidental or incidental. The state's argument is expected to rely on a combination of physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, and digital records to construct a clear sequence of events. A primary objective for prosecutors is to establish intent. This involves showing that the suspects knowingly engaged in conduct that resulted in lethal force. Investigators documented multiple gunshot wounds at the scene, along with shell casings and ballistic evidence. Prosecutors are expected to argue that the number of shots fired and the circumstances under which they occurred support a finding of intentional violence rather than reckless behavior. Linking the suspects to the weapons used in the shooting is another central pillar of the case. Law enforcement recovered evidence during the arrests, including items believed to connect at least one suspect to firearms activity. Ballistic comparisons, residue testing, and firearm possession history are expected to be presented to demonstrate a physical link between the suspects and the shooting. The proximity of the suspects to the scene before and after the incident is also expected to play a role. Witness testimony is anticipated to support the prosecution's timeline. This may include statements from individuals who were present before or after the shooting, residents in the area, or individuals who had contact with the suspects earlier that night. Prosecutors will likely use these accounts to corroborate surveillance footage and digital data. Digital and forensic evidence is expected to reinforce the case. This includes cell phone location data, call records, text messages, and potential surveillance footage from nearby locations. Together, these elements are intended to establish movement, timing, and coordination, reducing ambiguity about who was present and when. Defense strategies are expected to focus on challenging the strength and interpretation of the evidence presented by the prosecution. Attorneys representing the accused may argue that the evidence does not conclusively establish intent or direct responsibility for the fatal shooting. One potential defense argument involves disputing participation. Defense counsel may argue that presence at or near the scene does not equate to involvement in the shooting. If multiple individuals were present, the defense may assert that responsibility cannot be clearly assigned without definitive proof linking a specific suspect to the fatal shots. Challenges to forensic evidence are also likely. This may include questioning the chain of custody, the accuracy of ballistic testing, or the interpretation of gunshot residue results. Defense attorneys may argue that forensic conclusions rely on assumptions rather than definitive matches. Witness credibility may also be contested. Defense teams often examine inconsistencies in statements, potential bias, or limited visibility due to time of day and lighting conditions. Any discrepancies may be used to weaken the prosecution's narrative. Questions surrounding intent, role, or presence may become central themes. The defense may argue that even if a suspect was involved in an altercation or present during the incident, there is insufficient proof of intent to kill. These arguments aim to introduce reasonable doubt rather than present an alternative narrative. The killing of Britnee McKnight prompted a visible response within the Rocky Mount community. Residents expressed concern about public safety, particularly regarding late-night violence in residential areas. The incident added to ongoing discussions about crime patterns and enforcement strategies within the city. Law enforcement officials issued public statements emphasizing the seriousness of the crime and the department's commitment to accountability. Authorities highlighted the arrest as evidence of investigative progress, while also acknowledging broader concerns about gun-related incidents. Community discussions extended beyond the specific case, touching on recurring concerns about firearms access and nighttime activity. For residents living near South Franklin Street, the incident altered perceptions of safety. Some residents reported increased caution during late hours, while others called for heightened patrols and preventive measures. The case also influenced public discourse about how violent incidents are addressed and communicated. While arrests provided some reassurance, uncertainty surrounding trial outcomes contributed to ongoing unease among residents. Beyond the immediate fact of the case, the shooting reflects broader patterns seen in late-night violent incidents. Many such cases occur during early morning hours, when visibility is reduced and witness availability is limited. These conditions often complicate investigations and legal proceedings. The intersection of drug activity and violent crime is another recurring theme. Charges filed during the arrest suggest the presence of controlled substances, highlighting how drug-related environments can escalate into lethal confrontations. Prosecutors may argue that these conditions increase the likelihood of armed conflict. Systemic issues are also evident, including the challenges law enforcement faces in preventing spontaneous acts of violence. While reactive measures such as arrests and prosecutions are essential, the case raises questions about long-term prevention, enforcement resources, and community engagement strategies. At present, the case remains within the judicial process. Both suspects are being held without bond as legal proceedings continue. Court appearances, motions, and evidentiary hearings are expected as the case moves toward trial. Several questions remain unresolved. The precise sequence of events leading up to the shooting has not been fully disclosed publicly. The specific roles played by each suspect, as well as the motive behind the confrontation, remain under examination. It is also unclear how defense challenges may affect the admissibility of certain evidence. Pending rulings could shape the scope of testimony and forensic material presented at trial. The killing of Britnee McKnight is defined by a clear set of established facts: a late-night shooting, 1 fatality, 1 surviving victim, 2 arrests, and ongoing legal proceedings. Investigators have outlined a case built on forensic evidence, witness accounts, and digital data. Prosecutors aim to demonstrate intent and accountability, while defense teams prepare to challenge the reliability and interpretation of that evidence. What remains unresolved are the finer details surrounding motive, decision-making, and individual responsibility. Until the judicial process concludes, these elements remain open questions. The case continues to stand as an example of how a single incident can expose broader concerns about violence, enforcement, and accountability, without conclusions extending beyond what the evidence ultimately proves. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.